Hey guys, so I just put out my best of 2019 list and now it's on to the worst. And you know what sort of films had devastatingly shite years? Sequels, reboots, and remakes. Holy fuck, there were some bad ones. So I've gone through the films that had deep emotional stories, interesting complex character studies, and films that had so much care and love put into them. And now I'm going to talk about the stuff that had me glad I paid $8.50 and no high for a ticket. So I'll start with some dishonorable mentions first. Aladdin. This movie was not terrible and as bad as I thought it would be, and the film is the first, and not last, Disney live-action film to make an appearance in this video. Aladdin is an oddball as it makes some noticeable changes, which I honestly am alright with. The middle third of the film I actually felt myself enjoying, but looking back I'm pretty sure it's just because it was the stuff I remember. For what it's worth, the Friend Like Me number is alright, and Will Smith is actually really charismatic as the genie. And he brings something new to the role, but unfortunately where the film fails is in the first and third act. The film is so strange and the live action format obviously limits the film to bland scenes of exposition, or an awfully CGI mess with Guy Ritchie's weird fast motion scenes. In the third act, the action scenes were so ridiculously over the top and it's so obvious that it would not look half as bad as if it were animated. They also try to flesh out Jasmine's character a lot more, which is the best aspect of the film to me. And then she gets her own song, which is fine, but then as soon as she's finished, she's rendered useless by the shell of the villain that is now the new Jafar. Anyway, go watch the original, because I'm done with this crap. My next honorable mention is Godzilla King of the Monsters, and it sucks to put this here. This was one of my most anticipated movies of the year. I was a big fan of the first film despite the divisive reception it received, and I really liked the director Michael Dougherty's films Trick or Treat, and I loved Krampus. Unfortunately, Godzilla 2 is an overstuffed turkey. It's trying to be a sequel to the first Godzilla, set up an entire monsterverse, set up Kong vs Godzilla, introduce an entirely new cast, except for Ken Watanabe and Sally Hawkins, and a doomsday plot which is so convoluted and ridiculous, and it uses the terrible trope of the humans are a plague so we gotta wipe them out. However, it does have a couple of redeeming factors. The birth of Rodan and the subsequent chase with the orca is my favourite big budget action scene of the year. It's such a clever domino effect and it keeps building the threat of the monsters converging on the one location. And the scene where Ken Watanabe confronts Godzilla and the care and detail given to the personality of the monsters is really well done, as their characters are often more understandable and compelling than the humans. Unfortunately, it is the ridiculous human plot that drags this film down so much. My third dishonorable mention, yeah, The Lion King had to be there. The film does have its good. I like Hans Zimmer's soundtrack, has some cool new features but is largely the same. I kind of like Scar in this but is an entirely different character, and the visual effects are off the chart, but this film feels like the most epic nature documentary ever made. Unfortunately, the characters have no emotion in their faces. The story hits every single beat as the original, never throwing in a slight subversion as Aladdin or Dumbo did. But the film made $1.6 billion, so who am I to judge? So now let's get to the top 10 list, what you've all been waiting for. Man, this film is bland. There were moments where I felt like I was watching a Star Wars prequel. The film was terribly unengaging. Tessa Thompson and Chris Hemsworth had zero chemistry, which was strange because of how good they were together in Thor Ragnarok. Kumail Nanjiani's character Pawnee was funny at times, but otherwise this film was just a largely unimaginative, soft reboot of the Men in Black franchise, which is somehow worse off than the second film. The plot is ridiculously convoluted, has weak payoffs, and it was nice to hear Danny Elfman's theme again, so I guess there's that. Will Smith kill Smith? That was my made-up tagline for Gemini Man. Me and my mate were so excited to see this on premise alone. The idea of Will Smith fighting a younger version of himself was too good to miss. We had an empty cinema so we could laugh at the film, but unfortunately the film wasn't laughably bad. It was just a bland plot, with some generic and boring action scenes. There was one cool action scene which involved Will Smith and his doppelganger running around an apartment building, before a motorcycle chase with some legitimately impressive stunt work. Also, sometimes the CGI on Will Smith is genuinely great, like when it isn't on a tight close-up. However, stuff like this, Pet Sematary is a remake that was only made to bank off Stephen King's name, which is pretty hot right now due to the success of the It film and his other Netflix adaptations. The film takes some interesting twists on the original story, but it never ends up going anywhere. The main character, played by Jason Clarke, is nowhere near as interesting as his wife, played by Amy Seimetz, who has a history that is never explored enough in the film. Also, the cinematography is flat and darkly shot, as well as there only being one or two moments in the film that actually have a lasting effect in terms of scares. Going into Dumbo, I had an open mind. The original is a classic, but not as revered as the other Disney films in the golden era like Pinocchio, Bambi, Snow White or Fantasia. The cast seemed good enough. I loved Michael Keaton and Danny DeVito, two Burton film actors from Batman Returns, an extremely underrated film. I like Colin Farrell and Eva Green, but Dumbo was a film that never quite found its footing. The CGI on Dumbo was fine, and he was cute, but got sidelined for so much of the film to focus on Michael Keaton, who is basically playing Walt Disney as the villain of the film, as he tries to buy Dumbo. Also, the child actors in this film were terrible. I talked about how great the children in Marriage Story and Jojo Rabbit were, but here, they couldn't find anyone better? This is how the X-Men franchise ended, with a boring, unfocused plot. There are worse films in the franchise, but this has so many moments of wasted potential. They had a second chance to do the legendary Dark Phoenix arc, but instead they fucked up as bad as the first time they did it. McAvoy and Fassbender are still great, as in the final action scene is actually alright, where it feels small scale, where all the characters can use their abilities in clever ways. However, it is just weird moments in the script that drag this down. Xavier wiping out James' memory, Mystique's death which just feels like a way to get Jennifer Lawrence out of the franchise, and the weird subplot of Jessica Chastain and her space buddies. As well as this goofy shit.
Please, Jake. Please.
My god, the internet has made a huge fuss over Captain Marvel, the most bland, uninspiring, one-note, boring superhero film of the year. Brie Larson is a great actress. Seriously, watch Room, she's brilliant. But in this, her whole characteristic is smug, it's cold, sarcastic and condescending to the other characters. She gets her powers from standing near an engine, and she starts off the film discovering her personality when the audience already knows it, and we have a weird story as we already know what she's trying to discover. The action scenes are bland and uninteresting, as this film has what I call Lucy syndrome, where the character reaches a point of being so overpowered that there is no tension whatsoever, as they are able to simply blow everyone up with a click of a finger. The whole idea of Nick Fury's scar is stupid, and it undermines the whole overall mystique of his character, despite Sam Jackson being the best part of the film. It's not the worst MCU film, but it's very low on my list. I'm not going to go too far into Cats, as I literally just review it, but it's bad. Not as bad as everyone says, but it's still a horrific failure. The story is incomprehensible, the CGI is terrible, and every song is just about the character's personality and does nothing to further the story. So just watch my review here. I went way more into depth on why it fails, and I don't want to talk about it here. Terminator Dark Fate is fucking ridiculous. It just fails as a Terminator sequel, a sequel to Terminator 2, and in general, a film altogether. The start of the film is kind of intriguing, but by the time you reach the first action scene, all the character development has been rushed over, and then Sarah Connor shows up. It's cool to see Linda Hamilton, and she was easily, to me, the best part of the film. Arnold is weirdly shoved into this movie for fan service, although he does the least fan servicey thing in the opening scene. The action scenes are ridiculously over the top, even for a Terminator film, and the main character Danny is so weirdly set up. She just accepts all this weird time travel shit, and how she's the savior of the future. And the film has so many terrible monologues about inspiring hope, and at one point I sunk to the ground laughing. What Hellboy could have been. Guillermo del Toro wanted to make Hellboy 3 for so many years, but the studio never wanted any of it. So now we get this ridiculous reboot, full of bad CGI, awful ADR, and a story that is so needlessly complicated. I was laughing right from the opening scene. The gore is cool, and some of the action scenes are so ridiculous that they're hilarious. David Harbour is trying his hardest to make this film work, but ultimately, the directing, writing, and the visuals are all working against him. What to say about The Fanatic? It's a weird one. Fred Durst of Limp Bizkit directed this, and it definitely shows. Travolta's performance is so strange, and he doesn't quite get the condition of his character right. The cinematography looks like a TV show, and some of the scenes are just hilarious, and it seems like the director just pointed the camera at Travolta as he was getting into character.
Moose is in the house. Moose is in the house. Watch out. Watch out. Here's Moosey.
There are some cool looking animated scenes with sketches, but the climax of the film is so overly gruesome and horrid that the viewer gets no pleasure from watching it. It's just a strange sense of guilt. The dialogue is so terribly bad in this film, and the exposition narrating is embarrassing. I can't even classify this as a movie. It feels like a fake Tropic Thunder film where John Travolta plays a mentally challenged guy. Fanatic is easily the most bizarre and worst film of 2019. So that's my list. Did you agree? Did you disagree? I'd love to know what you thought. Leave your own personal list in the comment section below. Please like and subscribe to the Young Cynics. We're a new channel, and any support would be greatly appreciated. So until next time, bye!
Men look much better in slow motion. It makes me want to sing quite loud.